On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina.
All right, everybody, I'm here with Kirby Retzer. Kirby, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate your time. Tell the listeners about yourself, if you would, please.
Yeah, my name is Kirby Retzer. I'm a certified muscle systems specialist in Fort Myers, Naples, Florida. Been doing this for about a year. And for the last 10 before that, I was within professional baseball. Majority of the time with the Red Sox was our minor league coordinator, did years in AAA, ran our rehab, and then actually started with the org as an intern back in 2013. So yeah, wore a bunch of different hats. And now kind of more on like the true rehabilitative side of things, like injury resolution, and even guys that are healthy trying to mitigate some of the risk of some of the preventable injuries.
So obviously we go way back for the Red Sox days. I'm sure we'll talk about some of our past, some of the baseball stuff. But I also want to get into what you're doing now. I think some of the conversations that I'm going to try to have moving forward with these podcasts is just where are people now? And you were one of the very first episodes I ever did for this. And just kind of showing that there is life outside of baseball. There is opportunity to influence not only the game specifically, but just the strength and conditioning field as a whole. And so I think we'll get into that as well. But first one, what is your best professional baseball story that you have from your time in the game? Either something that makes you smile, something you're proud of, just maybe your fondest memory. Like what comes to mind when I ask you that?
It was actually my first year out of baseball. So I leave December 1st, I finish. And then I get a call right after Christmas from Chris Sale. And he's like, hey, man, waving the no trade clause. I going to the Braves. He's like, I want to come train with you at the clinic. I was like, okay, cool. So he came down and we evaluated him. He wasn't in any pain at the moment. And like 5 days after we were down there, we were working out. We would always lift first, then throw. We'd go out, play catch. His ball flight just wasn't like it normally was. Wasn't carrying. He was kind of cutting stuff off. We finished, and he's like, "Yeah, my neck's just kind of stiff." We get him in there, get him on the table, and when we did the evaluation, it was like chronic neck stuff back from when he was with Chicago. It just pop up. He's like, "Yeah, I miss a start once a year." He called it taco neck. Like when you eat a taco, you just kind of like get stuck and your neck gets stiff, sleep on it weird, stuff like that. So we get him on the table, and he had like a real difficult time managing not his throwing shoulder, but his right side with like full abduction and cervical side bend, like that combination, like that muscle synergy up that way, and clean that up. And within like 15 minutes, he got off the table. He's like, hey man, like my neck's never felt this good. And he's like, I've had it cracked, popped, stuck with needles, lasered, the whole nine, and this is different. And we kind of explained what we did, and he's like, I want this to be a part of my routine now, because he was just coming there just lifting. Like we evaluated him, but didn't bite on anything. We just kind of getting to know him. I was new with the methodology, so he got off that table, and I was like, I have a personal experience with this method, and I've seen it help myself. It helped me avoid a surgery. All the schooling and everything that I went through with it over the last like year of just studying it, I knew that it was something that can really help people. So when he like really invested in it from that moment, I was like, man, this guy's got a chance to like be healthy again. And if he's healthy, he's a real good pitcher. And I was like, and if he's a real good pitcher, then I think he's got a chance to be the best pitcher in the league. So I put a bet in for him to win the Cy Young when the betting line's open, and he did it. And so for me to like see him go, because I was the guy that did his whole rehab, like 19, I was the for rehab guy, 20, when his elbow went out, I did his, the whole nine through everything. I was in Fort Myers at at the depths of the bottom with him, and like know what the rehab process is like, especially for him. So to see him go from the depths of Hades to the man on top of the mountain was really like something amazing to be a part of. Like he flew us up there to work on him twice during the season. Like we went into spring training, evaluated him post game. Like we wrote his program for the whole season. Like we kept it hush hush throughout the whole year. And he's like, let me get through a whole season and I'll shout this from the rooftops that this is what's helping me. So for that to now come full circle, that was it, man. So to still be involved with pro ball, even from a distance, like that was it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Like I said, I think that same for me. Like I'm working at a different facility, but I'm with guys in the off season. Like you can still impact the game even without being in the game. And I think that's kind of one of the themes that we're going to hit on here. But knowing Chris personally, just like he's just one of the best guys I've ever been around, and he's an absolute workhorse. And to have seen him struggle the way he did, and to be there with him, and again, I wasn't there the same way that you were, but you know, he was in Boston with us and we thought he was healthy, and then he had this come up, and then he thought he was healthy, and then he had that come up, and just it for me, like to be behind the scenes and even like hear people saying like, oh, this guy, we pay him all this money and he doesn't pitch, he's always hurt. Like I know from experience and like from conversation with him that ate him alive, and like all he wanted to do was pitch and pitch well for Boston and just earn his contract. And it just was one thing after the next. And then, you know, this year, just to see him go out and just do what he did. And, you know, for you, like, it's awesome that you were there with him for every bit of it, up and down and in and out and good and bad. And so I want to get into the system. But first, let's kind of maybe knock off some of these more general questions, and then we can get into kind of the depths of that and kind of run. But what do you believe in within strength and conditioning, or maybe specifically in the rehab side of things, that others think you are crazy for believing?
Yeah, I think on the true just general strength and conditioning side, I would say machines, and the fact that machines are not, especially within professional sports, the fact that machines are not used, I feel like is just asinine. Um, for the listeners out there, like kind of talk about a strength curve versus a resistance, like a strength and a resistance profiles. So at a squat, right? Like traditional squat, split squat, right? All the stress is where, right? Like it's hard to produce hip extension when the hip is flexed, right? All the loads at the bottom of a squat. So my hips are flexed. I'm having to produce extension on the way out, right? Got it. Some of these other machinery, like the way that they're set up and the way that we can determine exercise selection, why are we never getting hip extension stress when you're extended? Yeah, you'll get that with a bridge, right? You're getting hip extended. It's hardest at the top when you're at an extended position. Great. We do a good job of that with hip extension in the sagittal plane or sagittal plane lower extremity, but we don't do that at all with anything else ever, which I find confusing. Like for example, all the guys that train with us in the off season, their favorite machine is the pec deck and reverse pec deck. And we think about upper extremity development and pressing variations. All of our stress is where when we're full, either like if you're close by your elbows, if your elbows are close by and you're more like sagittal plane flexion extension, okay, all that stress is when I'm extended. So I'm having to produce flexion from an extended position. Cool. All the way up here, if I'm a little bit higher elbowed or like a true bench press, even 45 degrees, I'm kind of horizontally, abducted. So all my stress is in that position. I'm never getting any stress when I'm horizontally adducted, right? When a pec deck, you'd be able to come all the way across and get full, adduction when I'm adducted, not just adduction or flexion when I'm, on the long side. So, machines allow you to challenge you flip the resistance profile and the strength profile, and Tom Purvis with RTS does a really good job of explaining that for those that are looking for some continuing education on that stuff. But yeah, there's a reason that those things are thousands and thousands of dollars. Same thing with the reverse pec deck, right? Like, you're kind of getting stress from an adducted position in abduction. Leg extensions, right? Like when are you ever getting knee extension torques when your knee is extended, right? When all those split squat variations, all the knee torques when I'm flexed, right? So it's just of paramount important for us to be able to develop tension in position, right? And under load and different configurations and different configurations really. So machines allow us to do that. And I think across the industry, they're just pushed away. And I get it, everybody's got a squat rack, and at times in a minor league setting, you're in a hallway, right? You can't have machines when you travel, and I understand that. But if we take the principles of what the machines afford us to do and apply that training methodology while we're in a hallway, we can be creative with banded resistance, with different forms, with anchors great, and you can change where the line of force is coming from, how we kind of dictate ourselves, and kind of recreate some of that. So yeah, I would definitely say machines.
Yeah, I feel like they're starting to come back in a little bit. It's still
Good.
kind of like,
Good.
I don't know, but I don't know. For me personally, man, I've always loved using machines. If nothing else, like just I don't know. There's something about it, and I look back at, like, I've seen videos of guys like in the old days of baseball training, and they're all using machines. And honestly, one of the things I really loved in the big leagues was when you go to the on a road trip and you go in the visiting weight room, they would have all the home equipment on the visiting side, and then the home side obviously had all their new equipment. So we would just crush all the machines. Like, it was mostly myself and the coaches, but even some of the players would get in and be like, dude, I haven't seen a leg extension machine in so long. I got to get on it. I haven't seen a leg curl or a hammer strength row or a chest press. And like, can we do machines instead this week? And I'm like, okay, like we would almost know that we would have to like mix up the programming when we were going certain places, just because we knew they had different machines than what we had where we were. So that was always just fun for me to just like, yeah, I can just hop on the machine. I can get some rows, I can get some leg extensions, but there is a lot more value than just that machine. And again, I see the other side of like, they do cost money, they do take up space. Some of them only serve one purpose. Minor leagues, you may not have any of the combination of the money, the space, whatever it is, but a lot of times the one purpose they serve is a really valuable purpose. That's why the machine exists in the first place. So I agree with you. I think I'm starting to see them a little bit more frequently. But again, maybe it's easier for people like ourselves in the off season, and we're at facilities that do have access to machines that sometimes you don't in the season. At least to address and maybe clean up certain things like you're talking about on the rehab side of things. But you also don't want guys to get super dependent on them, because when they go to the affiliates, like, they're not necessarily going to have access to it. And then it becomes that weird balancing thing of like what they need, what they want, what we have to prepare them for. And it kind of all just fits into that big thing. But yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, man. I think machines are kind of on their way back, and I'm hopeful that they do. And people kind of start studying and seeing the value of them, but I don't know. We'll see. At some point, it may be nothing but water bags and weighted balls. And I don't really know. It could go any number of ways, I guess.
Good job security if that happens.
Yeah, no kidding. How about on the rehab side? Anything in particular that sticks out to you?
Yeah. Like, I think like from a methodology standpoint, the big one is that like everybody just trains the shoulder and the elbow and maybe the wrist, but the neck and the fingers are like just completely ignored. And that kind of goes back to like the overarching principle of like torque across a system, right? We move, our body is one whole system, right? We produce tension, we move, that's how we create motion. So how are we like evaluating and improving the ability to develop tension on the long side and the short side of our system and how we move? And I think like within a shoulder program, so think about like more athletic training room here, right? Like a shoulder program has traditionally always been done in the athletic training room. If you look at like the resistance profiles of those motions, it's been the same thing since the beginning of time, right? And we get stress in the same positions with the same segments in the same ways at the same times. So it's the same machine argument almost, right? Of how can we adjust how we put stress through the system? So like external rotation, right? Like if it's done manually, that's a different conversation. But if guys at scale are doing it, bands to my left, I'm turning right, all the stress is right here. Okay. Or if I'm up in 90, all the stress is here. I'm never making it hard at the ends. And I think like FRC's done a decent job of talking about that a little bit, but I'm just hard pressed to believe that there's a lot more to that. So yeah, I think from a rehabilitative side, like how are you trying to determine quality of control, long side, short side, and then when you go to try to improve that, how can you make it this robust thing that can handle a multitude of stressors once it goes to go throw, right?
Yeah, we always used to talk, I mean, jokingly, semi-jokingly about like the total body muscle, but like there was some validity to like your system works as a whole. Like you should probably train it in some capacity as a whole. And, we were talking before this, and I've gotten into climbing a lot lately, and just being able to be on the walls and like understanding how my foot position affects how my shoulders and my hands can get to certain spots on the wall, or if I get a certain grip in just the right position, like how that affects my fingers on the wall affect the rest of my arm, and how can I build tension. And I mean, for me, I'm a lot bigger than a lot of the climbers are, so like it makes it more challenging for me. But I've been starting to have conversations with people in the baseball world about like, do you think climbing can transfer to baseball? I'm like, to the extent that I do it, probably not, just because I go like more, further along the line than some people. But I think there is probably value to understanding that, like, when you go, if you grab a hold in a certain spot, like where your feet are in space, where your like your core is in space, where your trunk is in space, like where your head is in space, where your neck is, like all of that plays into whether you're going to succeed on the wall or not, and whether it's going to be hard for you or not. And a lot of people that I see that are really good climbers, it's like they're painting a masterpiece while they're climbing the wall. They're so smooth, they're so effortless, and they're so in control of their bodies and like where they are in position in space. And it's just beautiful to watch, to be honest. Like I just sit there and watch people who are better than me sometimes. But I think there is some validity, one, to like the strengthening of your grip, your fingers, your wrist, your elbow, your shoulder, but two, just like positioning, and like all of that plays kind of into what athleticism is and what throwing is. And like guys want their mechanics to be locked in and be really good, but also like there are days where your mechanics are not the same, and you have to be able to be strong and be able to like display force and all of this in different positions. And going back to your point about like shoulder program, like how many times have you done the same banded external rotation, the same banded internal rotation, the same like T's, Y's, A's? Like you've done the same over and over and over and over, and you got really good at T's, Y's, A's, but did it actually prepare you for the game and for the throwing? I don't know. Probably not. Maybe if you don't do anything versus doing bands and T's, Y's, A's, you're probably in a better spot. But is there a next level to that? I would say I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
So
The one word that I think summarizes everything that you said is leverage, right? Like you
correct.
understand how to create leverage,
That's
and
exactly
that has transfer, that has transfer for sure.
correct. I couldn't agree more. Okay, so let's talk about your new job, and we can kind of talk about what you do now versus time in baseball, the differences in your life, the differences in the job, how you feel, if you ever want to get back in. Like we're just going to open it up, but maybe start simple with the system that you're working with, because you did mention it helped you avoid a surgery. Like I just want to know about the system you're implementing, and then we can kind of broaden our scope from there.
Yeah, so I'm a certified muscle system specialist, MSS. So back when I finished playing, my arm, and I was working for the Twins, my arm was just hurting me a bunch. And went through the AT, PT, they sent me to the ortho, and everybody concluded that I needed an ulnar nerve transposition. So anytime that like I supinated or pronated, my ulnar nerve would kind of flip out of that fossa, and they want to take my flexor mass off my medial epicondyle, move my ulnar nerve, reseal that flexor mass to the epicondyle. And I was done playing. I didn't want to go through a surgery, and it hurt, man. Like I couldn't shampoo my hair, couldn't throw a baseball, I couldn't swing a golf club. Like it sucked, and couldn't lift. So kind of was just going through it. And a buddy of mine was like, hey, there's this dude a little bit south of you and down in Naples that's helping people out, either avoid surgery or delay the surgery and kind of rehab in a different way. I was like, okay. So I went down there and saw him, and we went through the evaluation, and he found that in my shoulder girdle, like there were multiple positions where I didn't move well, particularly in retraction, elevation, and cervical positioning. So like when I was left rotated, I couldn't make any movement right, but I could go right. But anytime I was turned left, I couldn't go right with my head. And when you start to combine that with any sort of scapular motion, my body just couldn't produce any tension. So we cleaned all that up. And within 2 weeks, I was able to throw again. I was able to hit a golf. Like I had my arm back. Like I could straighten my elbow without pain. Like the tingling and the numbness went away. And I was just like, I was fascinated. So ever since then, I've been learning from this guy. His name's Jay Weitzner. He owns Symmetry Exercise Clinic, and he has for the last 11 years. And so so the founder of the methodology, his name's Greg Mack. He's out of Columbus, Ohio. He went into the Navy out of high school. He was a Navy diver. He was an engineer on a nuclear fast attack submarine for 4 years. So he ran the nuclear power plant on a submarine. This guy's brilliant, man. Like he's the smartest person I've ever been around. He's got a library the size of, a bookshelf that's 20 feet long, 10 feet high. And like, just to watch that guy give information just verbatim from this resource like that he's built, it's really something else. So once I got helped, always wanted to learn about it. And in that evaluation, Jay knew that I was an exercise science guy. So like he could explain some of what was going on, and he changed where he was pushing on me, like what position he was pushing on me. And it changed some things. I was like, why did you do that? And he explained what a moment arm was. And I had no idea what a moment arm was. And he explained, okay, pushing in this direction straight down compared to down and across changes things. I was like, well, why'd you do that? And he's like, well, it's a resultant force, and that changes what has to happen based on the direction of force. And he started like explaining just basic principles of physics that I didn't get in undergrad. So I was like, okay, I got to really learn some of this. So like basic anatomy had to double down on, but more so like physics and just basic biomech. I had to really kind of get schooled up on. So all my continuing education over the last 10 years was with those two guys, based around physics, biomechanics, applied anatomy, physiology. And I knew that in the baseball landscape, I, as a strength and conditioning specialist, couldn't really get my hands on guys. And ATs and PTs, anytime there's pain, it's you go to the training room, right? So for 10 years, I just learned this stuff and watched what we did, and watched and considered and questioned what I may have done or what these guys would have done as muscle systems specialists, and just observed. And then it got to the point to where I was like, okay, this needs to happen. So I certified a month before I left the Red Sox, and my plan was to continue to be our strength conditioning coordinator or work in whatever capacity we felt was going to be good with the Red Sox. And then ultimately we just contractually just couldn't come to an agreement. But my plan was to bring this to the Sox and start using it. And, just didn't work out. So when I was looking for what was next, Jay was ready to scale and grow and bring more people on. So it was just a smooth transition for me to start down there with him. And yeah, been practicing as a muscle system specialist now for a year. And dude, like I think I've learned more in the last year than I have in the last probably 5 or 6 with Boston.
Is this weekend certification? Is this like a study on your own pace online? Sort of like, what is the process to get the certification?
Yeah, so it's 4 weekends. So Saturday, Sunday, 4 of them. And you go to Columbus, or if there's enough of a cohort, Greg or I would travel to that location and give the course. There is an online version of it, but there has to be some in-person stuff done in order to go through it. Like there's people in Europe that have gone through it, but they have to come in person at some point. So he recorded everything, so there's stuff you can go back and watch, which is helpful. But yeah, it's a $4,000 course. It's an advanced credential, and it's eight days of classroom stuff, and it's applied as you kind of go through it. So there's go through. Probably he works in 45-minute blocks. You go through stuff and then go apply it. Go through it, apply it. Go through it, apply it.
If you could sum this course up, what would it be? Is it more hands-on physics-based application? Is it more like revamping strength training? Like what does this kind of look like? You know, if you were to give me like the back of the book cover, you know, description of this.
It's a way to systematically analyze a person to help them reduce pain and eliminate unwanted sensation like tightness, stiffness, right? It's truly an engineer's perspective of helping people to feel better. So, you know, what that looks like, there's a few like key pillars, but the first one's going through like a real robust injury history. Because I think when we get hurt, when stuff's gone on, when we've had things, even if it wasn't like a traumatic injury, when we just don't feel right and we don't feel right for like periods of time, we start to store that information in ourselves as almost like post-traumatic stress. Like you almost have this guarding reflex that starts to happen. And if it's never resolved, if those motions and positions that we've lost don't return, it's a version of post-traumatic stress. So we do a really good job of like detailing the injury history and making sure that we understand things that have gone on to the person. So first one would be good injury history. Second is a term called allostatic load and allostasis. So I had never heard of it until took the course, but basically I think we all understood the principle in pro ball of like you got an older guy that's coming in that's thrown 100+ innings for 5 years, you know, like he's different than a high school kid. Why, right? Like, you know, that there's just wear and tear on the body, right? Like, so that term, the ability to make an excursion from homeostasis is called allostasis. So like what are the variables that affect my ability to do that? Age, disease, current like limits in how I move. And he created a heuristic, which is basically like a numeral, like a number scale, 1 to 8 of where you fall on that spectrum. So you kind of lay out an injury history, you get a feel for this person's allostatic load, like how much can I really probably push this guy as I start to help him. And then once you kind of get those two things down, you start to get the person to move a little bit. And you look at range and you kind of look at, are there things that corroborate together and how can I use some of this information to help me, right? So like hip abduction is a synergy for side bending, right? Pelvic, pelvis turning this way and, upper quarter turning the other way, horizontal abduction and retraction. Like there's just synergies within the body and there's cross synergies. So like, can I have a good anchor as I go to move, or, is it an anchoring problem or is it a moving problem? So you kind of get a good understanding of range of motion for a person, because ultimately the last part of the process, which is the most important part, is called a QMAMC, which is a qualitative manual assessment of motor control. So basically, like everybody understands the influx of dynamometry these days, right? Like everything's coming in, they're looking at force output over, in a position, right? Okay. So we understand that there's value there. Well, what this affords you to do is, me as the practitioner, as a specialist, I'm the dynamometer, I'm the goniometer. I can see how much motion the person has. And then at any part in that motion, I can look at how much tension they can produce. And I provide a perturbation. So I'm ready, hold. Can you stop me? Can you do that on the right side as well as the left side? And I treat them as an N of 1. I don't look at normative data based on a numerical scale. I look at your right side compared to your left side from a range and a quality of control standpoint. And as the dynamometer, I can feel peak force. I can feel rate of rise. I can feel rate of force abatement. Like I can feel how quickly can they get there? Can they get there all the way? what's up? What else is moving as they're doing that? Are they, what's going on, right? And so once you kind of lay out what's gone on to the person in the past, how damaged they are, how, fresh and clean they are, how much they can move, how well they can control themselves, you start to really develop a good cohesive hypothesis of like, okay, this person really can't manage these motions and positions. We need to improve their ability to generate torque across these segments. And what we've seen is as we do that, people start to feel better. So, it's probably more than just the back of the napkin, but this stuff's never really been talked about. Greg just hasn't really had the chance to put it out there. So when you invited me on and had the opportunity to talk about this, like it's been years in the making for me to want to put this information out there, at least at like a high level overview. So that's kind of the evaluative Cliff Notes version of it. Once you figure out, okay, how do we want to try to improve? This is my hypothesis. This is what I feel like this person needs. How do I start to help them? And what does the exercise prescription kind of look like within that? That's kind of like the second part, which is cool too. So.
All right, everybody, that's going to conclude part 1 of this 2-part episode with Kirby. I hope you enjoyed this one. Personally, and definitely a little bit selfishly for me, it was good to catch up with an old friend and to hear that he's doing well, even though he has since left professional baseball. I think this is going to be a theme with some of the episodes moving forward, is that you can still impact the game of professional baseball, even if you're working on the outside. We'll also get into more about his job specifically in part 2, but for now that's going to conclude part 1. 3 things that I took from Kirby in this part of the episode: try to dig deeper on injury history to help guide programming decisions, take time to understand the allostatic load of your athletes, and normative data can be incredibly helpful, but we should also remember that each individual is a unique N of 1. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you again on the next one.